The stage was set for what was supposed to be a typical late-night interview. Stephen Colbert, known for his sharp wit and biting humor, welcomed Keanu Reeves with a mix of charm and subtle sarcasm. But tonight, something shifted. What started as playful banter quickly spiraled into a moment of raw confrontation that left everyone in the studio stunned. How did a casual joke turn into a heated exchange that no one saw coming? And what was it about Keanu Reeves's response that silenced one of television's most seasoned hosts? This story unpacks the tension, the drama, and the unforgettable comeback that changed everything. Make sure to like and subscribe to catch every moment of this explosive showdown. The audience settled into their seats, eager for another night of sharp humor and engaging conversation. Stephen Colbert, ever the master of ceremonies, began the interview with a sly grin and a pointed joke aimed at Keanu Reeves. "Keanu," he said, "you've played so many serious roles. We almost forget you're a real person who laughs and gets offended like the rest of us." The comment was met with a few chuckles from the crowd, but a palpable tension lingered beneath the surface. Why did this seemingly innocuous jab land so heavily? Was it simply the weight of expectation, or was there an unspoken history brewing between the two? Keanu, known for his calm demeanor and respectful nature, didn't respond with the easy smile or light-hearted deflection everyone anticipated. Instead, he fixed Colbert with a steady gaze that seemed to peel back the layers of the late-night host's carefully crafted persona. "Stephen," Keanu began, his voice measured but firm, "there's a difference between humor that connects and humor that divides. When jokes punch down, who's really laughing at the end?" The room fell silent. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Was this a subtle critique of the culture of late-night comedy? A call for accountability in an industry that often trades in quick laughs at the expense of others? Colbert, momentarily disarmed, offered a quick smile, but Keanu wasn't finished. "You've built a career on making people think while making them laugh, but what happens when the laughter stops and the truth remains?" It was a rhetorical question, one that cut deeper than the audience expected. The tension escalated as Colbert attempted to regain control. "Well, Keanu, I think we can agree that sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction." But the undercurrent of discomfort was clear. This was no ordinary exchange of quips. It was a subtle battle over respect, integrity, and the power dynamics inherent in comedy and celebrity. What would come next? Could the conversation steer back to familiar territory, or was this the beginning of a confrontation that would change the game for both men? The audience leaned forward, sensing the stakes had just risen dramatically. The atmosphere in the studio grew thick with anticipation as the exchange between Stephen Colbert and Keanu Reeves shifted from playful banter to something far more profound. It was clear that Keanu wasn't merely responding to a joke. He was making a statement, one that demanded attention not just from Colbert, but from everyone watching. The question he posed lingered in the air. When humor divides rather than unites, who truly benefits? Colbert, no stranger to navigating tense moments with his quick wit and practiced charm, tried to reclaim the narrative. "Keanu, you're known as Hollywood's nice guy, the calm in the storm. But tonight, you're storming the castle." His voice carried a mix of surprise and challenge, as if daring Reeves to push further. The audience chuckled nervously, sensing the underlying tension but unsure of where it was heading. Reeves remained composed, his expression unreadable but resolute. "I don't see kindness and confrontation as mutually exclusive," he said slowly. "Sometimes to be kind is to confront uncomfortable truths. To remain silent in the face of insincerity or injustice is to become complicit." His words struck a chord. In a culture that often prioritizes surface-level charm, Keanu was calling for a deeper honesty, a reckoning with the realities hidden beneath the polished veneer of entertainment. Stephen's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of frustration crossing his face before he masked it with a smile. Are you accusing me of insincerity? Of complicity? The question was rhetorical, but the implication hung heavy. Was this a challenge to Colbert's style, his role as a comedian who thrives on satire and irony? Keanu's response was deliberate. Not just you, Stephen, the entire system. Late-night comedy has the power to influence, to challenge, but also the risk of reinforcing stereotypes and divisions. I'm asking, what responsibility do we carry when we make people laugh? And what happens when laughter hides pain or masks deeper issues? The room was silent except for the soft hum of the studio lights. Colbert's usual rapid-fire responses slowed, replaced by a thoughtful pause that revealed the weight of Reeves's words. Was this a moment of reflection for the host, or merely a pause before a comeback? Then, unexpectedly, Colbert leaned forward, his tone softening but edged with curiosity. So you're saying that the laughter has to be earned? That the jokes have to mean something beyond the punchline? Keanu nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting into a faint, knowing smile. Exactly. Humor can be a bridge or a barrier. It can illuminate truth or bury it. The choice is ours. For a moment, the two men sat in silence, the air charged with a complex mix of respect, challenge, and unspoken understanding. The audience, captivated by the rare glimpse into this unguarded dialogue, watched closely. What would be the next move in this delicate dance? Would the tension escalate or find a resolution? But then, Colbert shifted gears, a spark of defiance, returning to his eyes. Keanu, you make it sound like comedy is a moral crusade. Isn't it just entertainment? Sometimes people just want to laugh, not think too hard. The question posed another challenge. Can comedy serve both purposes? Can it entertain while provoking thought without crossing into offense? And if so, who decides where that line is drawn? Keanu's comeback was sharp and unapologetic. Entertainment without conscience is empty. Laughter without reflection is fleeting. If we don't question the impact of our words, who will? The statement was not just a retort, it was a call to action. The exchange had evolved beyond a simple interview. It was now a clash of philosophies, a confrontation between the comfort of traditional late-night humor and the demand for accountability in a rapidly changing cultural landscape. The audience sensed the significance of the moment. This was no longer about jokes or ratings. It was about integrity, truth, and the power of words. As the conversation edged toward a climax, the question remained, who would emerge victorious in this battle of wills? And how would this exchange reshape the way we think about comedy, respect, and the courage to speak out? The tension in the studio grew almost palpable as the conversation between Stephen Colbert and Keanu Reeves reached a pivotal moment. Neither man was willing to relent, each embodying a contrasting vision of what entertainment, and more importantly, responsibility, should look like. The audience, caught in the middle, watched as the atmosphere shifted from lighthearted to serious, with the gravity of a courtroom drama. Colbert leaned back slightly, his fingers steepled thoughtfully, the playful smirk replaced by an intense focus. Keanu, you speak of responsibility, of conscience, but in a world saturated with outrage and division, where do you draw the line? Who gets to decide what is responsible? Comedy is meant to provoke, to challenge. Sometimes that means discomfort. His voice carried the weight of experience, the kind forged over years of walking the tightrope between controversy and laughter. Keanu's gaze did not waver. The line isn't fixed. It's a constant negotiation. It's about empathy, seeing beyond the punchline to the people affected. Can we still be provocative without being harmful? Absolutely. But it requires courage to confront not only the audience but ourselves. His tone was calm yet unyielding, a quiet force demanding reflection. Colbert sighed, acknowledging the difficulty of that path. But don't you think sometimes the audience just wants to escape? To forget their worries with a joke, even if it's edgy or irreverent? Is it fair to ask comedians to bear the burden of society's ills? That's the paradox, Keanu replied, his voice steady but intense. Comedy can be an escape. Yes, but it can also be a mirror. If we choose only to escape, are we truly living? Or just avoiding? The best comedy makes us laugh and think, sometimes at the same time. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. We owe it to ourselves and others to use our platforms wisely. Colbert's eyes narrowed, the game of verbal chess intensifying. Platforms. That's the key word, isn't it? Power? Influence? Do you believe I, as a comedian, wield too much power? Keanu nodded slowly. Power is not a question of size but of impact. Every word spoken on a stage or screen carries weight. Your words can reinforce stereotypes or break them down. They can build bridges or burn them. The question is, what kind of power do you want to have? The conversation was no longer just an exchange of opinions. It was a profound interrogation of the ethics of influence. The audience could sense the stakes had risen well beyond the confines of a late-night show. What was being debated was the very essence of how culture shapes and shifts, how leaders in the public eye navigate the balance between freedom and responsibility. Then, without warning, Colbert leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, charged with raw emotion. You're asking me to change everything about what I do, about who I am on this show. Are you saying I've been wrong all along? Keanu's expression softened, but his conviction remained firm. Not wrong, Stephen, but maybe it's time to evolve, to question, to grow, to listen. That's the courage it takes, not just to make people laugh, but to make a difference. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. The conversation had become a rare moment of vulnerability and challenge between two men who represented different worlds, but shared a common stage. It was a reminder that even in entertainment, the stakes could be deeply personal and profoundly societal. As the dialogue moved toward its conclusion, the question lingered. Would this exchange mark a turning point? Could comedy, and those who create it, rise to meet the challenge Keanu had laid before them? And how would Stephen Colbert respond to this call for change? As the exchange settled into a tense pause, the studio atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Stephen Colbert, known for his quick wit and unshakable stage presence, faced a choice that transcended his usual sharp banter. Would he embrace the challenge Keanu Reeves had laid before him, or retreat to the familiar territory of satirical jabs and comedic deflections? Colbert's eyes scanned the audience, sensing their mixture of expectation, curiosity, and perhaps even disbelief. The moment demanded sincerity, a rare glimpse beyond the facade of late-night entertainment. Slowly he nodded, as if acknowledging not just Keanu's words, but the weight of the responsibility they implied. I won't lie, Colbert began, his voice steadier now, stripped of the usual sarcasm. This isn't easy. Comedy is my craft, my refuge, and sometimes my weapon. But maybe it's time to rethink how I wield that weapon. Maybe it's time to ask harder questions, of myself and of the world. Keanu gave a subtle, approving smile. That's all anyone can ask. Progress isn't about perfection. It's about the willingness to try, to fail, and to keep going. The host leaned forward, the conversation shifting from confrontation to collaboration. So where do we start? How do we balance humor with honesty, laughter with respect? Keanu's gaze was steady, his answer thoughtful. By listening more than we speak. By recognizing the humanity behind every story and every joke. And by holding ourselves accountable, even when it's uncomfortable. The dialogue evolved into a candid discussion about the evolving landscape of comedy, culture, and media. They debated the impact of social media's immediacy, the pressure to constantly entertain, and the growing awareness of mental health and social justice issues. It was a conversation that many had avoided, but one that now felt urgent and necessary. Colbert reflected aloud, "Maybe the role of a comedian isn't just to make people laugh, but to make them think, to challenge norms without tearing down dignity. It's a delicate balance." Keanu nodded. "Exactly. And it's not about censorship, but about conscious creation. Comedy can be a powerful force for change if wielded responsibly." As the segment drew to a close, the two men shared a moment of mutual respect. The earlier tension transformed into a rare and genuine connection. The audience responded with applause, not just for the exchange itself, but for the courage it represented. This was more than a televised debate. It was a reflection of society's ongoing struggle to reconcile freedom of expression with empathy and accountability. Keanu Reeves had not only silenced Stephen Colbert's sharp tongue, but had also ignited a conversation that would ripple far beyond the studio walls. Would this moment inspire other entertainers to follow suit? Could it reshape the future of comedy and public discourse? And most importantly, what does this mean for the millions who look to these figures for both laughter and leadership? The answers remained unwritten, but one thing was clear: the conversation had only just begun. The studio lights dimmed slightly, signaling the nearing end of the segment, but the energy in the room was far from waning. The atmosphere had transformed from a battleground of sharp wit into a space charged with reflection and potential. Stephen Colbert and Keanu Reeves sat with a newfound respect, both men clearly changed by the exchange that had unfolded on live television. Keanu leaned back, his calm demeanor unshaken. "I think the biggest lesson here is that no one is above learning, no matter how successful or experienced they are. We all have blind spots. Sometimes it takes someone else to point them out." Colbert nodded thoughtfully, his usual quick smile replaced by a sincere expression. "I've been in this business a long time, and I thought I understood the line between humor and harm. But tonight, Keanu's words made me realize how often we cross that line without noticing. Maybe the biggest joke is thinking we can't evolve." The audience, still captivated, sat in silence, hanging on every word. This was more than entertainment. It was a rare moment of vulnerability and growth broadcast to millions. The host and guest had moved past the caricatures they often played on screen and stepped into something profoundly human. As they continued, the conversation broadened beyond comedy. They touched on responsibility, not just for entertainers, but for everyone who influences public opinion. Social media has made everything faster, louder, and sometimes crueler, Keanu observed. "It's easy to get caught up in the noise and forget the impact of our words," Colbert sighed. "True, and as someone who shapes narratives nightly, I have to be conscious of that. Humor isn't a shield to avoid accountability. It's a tool that can either build bridges or burn them." The discussion turned to the personal cost of public scrutiny. Keanu shared moments from his own life, times when he felt misunderstood or unfairly judged. "It's humbling to realize how little control we have over how others perceive us, but it's empowering to choose how we respond." Colbert nodded, the tension from earlier fully dissolved. Tonight wasn't just about a comeback or a clash. It was about opening the door to better conversations, ones that respect complexity and encourage empathy. The segment closed with both men standing, shaking hands with genuine warmth. The audience erupted in applause, not just for the spectacle, but for the spirit of honesty and growth that had defined the encounter. Cameras captured the moment, knowing it was one that would be replayed and discussed for weeks. Behind the scenes, producers and crew whispered about the unexpected depth and impact of the episode. It was rare to witness such a candid and transformative moment in live television, especially in an era often dominated by sound bites and sensationalism. As viewers at home reflected on the exchange, many asked themselves, could this be the turning point for late-night television? Will more entertainers embrace the challenge to grow, to listen, and to lead with conscience as well as charisma? Keanu Reeves had silenced Stephen Colbert's sharp tongue. Yes, but more importantly, he had sparked a dialogue about integrity, responsibility, and the power of change. This moment was a reminder that even in the world of entertainment, truth and respect could prevail. The episode ended not with finality, but with hope. Hope that those in the spotlight might illuminate the way forward, inspiring audiences to think deeply and act compassionately. The true triumph was not in a single comeback, but in the courage to confront hard truths and emerge stronger. This was the kind of conversation that changed minds, hearts, and perhaps even the course of culture itself. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more compelling content that dives beneath the surface of headlines and explores the stories that matter.